This is the Last Minute Blues Podcast with Alex Ferrario, Donnie Fandango, and Jeremy Rutherford on 101 ESPN.
The Last Minute Blues Podcast is presented by Blue Note Roofing. Roofing, siding, and gutters. Your St. Louis roofing experts. Visit BlueNoteRoofingSTL.com for free inspection.
It is the Last Minute Blues Podcast presented by Blue Note Roofing, roofing, siding, and gutters, your St. Louis roofing experts. Visit BlueNoteRoofingSTL.com for a free inspection. Donnie Fandango in the Jeff Burton studios, joined by my man, Alex Ferrario from 101 ESPN. My other man, Jeremy Rutherford from The Athletic, and he's back.
Other.
Yeah, you're the other one.
You're the man, I'm the other.
Yeah, you're the other man.
I'm sorry. That did not come out how I meant for it to. You're both my homies. I apologize about that. And, but also, if I didn't give you something to bust my balls about, then it wouldn't be a podcast, right?
It's weird because I never take offense to anything, and for some reason I did that. So I rescind my offense.
JR takes offense to everything now. He's been on the West Coast too long.
All right, so here's the thing. We don't have a lot of time for this particular podcast, but it's for a good reason, because we have a podcast guest that is coming up here in about 40 minutes, and his name is Tom Stillman, who I don't know if you guys know, but he's the chairman of the Blues.
What?
Yeah.
What? On this podcast?
Yeah. One of the owners, as it were.
We can get any of those guests.
So Tom is going to come in. We're going to talk about the direction of the team. But since JR, you weren't with us last week, I have just a few different questions about that particular timing of the trade deadline. And then also now, so the Blues have won 4 out of their last 5 games. Of course. Unexpectedly, I suppose. And so I just have some sort of general questions as to where we are now. But JR, I'm very curious, when you are with the team and it is trade deadline week, can you feel it amongst those guys? Like, can you sort of feel like maybe the uneasiness, the sort of tension, that sort of thing?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. And not, we'll get into this year, but just over the 20 years covering the team, it's always the 3 or 4 weeks before the trade deadline. Alex, you feel it too, going in the locker room. And when I say feel it, it's not like you walk in, you talk to guys and they're nervous or they're different, same personality, same everything, but just everybody's on edge. And in listening to the players after the trade deadline, like you listen to a Robert Thomas, we've heard some comments from him. I talked to Colton Parayko on the road trip. Then when you hear it in their words, what it was like to experience it, their families going through it, they get text messages all the time from acquaintances, people they might have met 6 months ago, or even close friends saying, is this true? Is this true? Imagine trying to explain it to everybody. It's not like they're going to just ignore every text message that comes through. So yes, you can definitely feel it leading up to it. And I'm sure we'll get into Parayko here a little bit, had a chance to talk to him, but it just takes over their lives.
One of the things that we talked about last week, JR, when you weren't here, was, listen, I understand that Colton Parayko is a player in the NHL. I understand that business happens and sometimes that you have to make deals. I think the problem that a lot of us had was just the way in which that it went down, pardon me, for a guy like Colton Parayko that absolutely does not deserve that in the slightest. Is there anything that can be done to sort of nip some of this stuff in the bud? I know that Doug Armstrong is famously tight-lipped when it comes to these sorts of things, but as I've been listening, over the course of the last weeks to some other things, you have so many people that are involved, from the players' agents agency to family members to team members to there's just a lot of people. Is there any way to sort of I guess there's really not a way to keep what happened to Parayko happening again. It's probably impossible.
Well, before JR answers that, what's fascinating to me is just let's look at this past trade deadline. Even for the Blues, the Parayko stuff was leaked. The Braden Shen stuff wasn't leaked. We found out that they had asked Braden Shen that the Islanders kind of wanted an answer in a certain time limit, and no information got out until the trade was done and they kind of already knew he was going to accept it. John Carlson deal from Washington. They knew about that 10 hours before the deal was accepted, and Carlson found out about it, right? there's ways for this stuff to not get leaked. It's just, how do you keep two sides of a conversation tight-lipped? Like, you could keep your side tight-lipped as much as you want. How do you keep the other side tight-lipped? And that's the part that I don't know how you accomplish. Right. It's been done. There are teams that keep things very quiet, but there's also stuff that just gets out there and gets leaked.
Yeah, so interesting. Doug Armstrong came out and made the comment that they checked the phone records, the email records of people on the Blues staff to find out if they were involved in the leak, and he said they weren't. Everybody checked out. So each case is different. Like, we could examine, like, you could put 60 minutes on the Parayko trade and try to figure out where it happened, and it's probably happened from a different, way than another trade got leaked. Yeah, so it's different in every case. But yeah, you have all the parties that you mentioned, the agents and so forth. But after Doug Armstrong made the comment about that they checked the phone records,
he sopranoed everybody.
So after, imagine the trade deadline's over. It got over at 2 p.m. Central Time. I was Pacific Time, so noon. Doug Armstrong did a Zoom with reporters, and I happened to be staying in the same hotel as the Blues brass out in San Jose. So I was able to then go up to a conference room and sit down with Doug Armstrong one-on-one and talk to him for about 20 minutes about the trade deadline. And as I'm walking into the room, he goes, sit down. So I grab a chair and I sit down, and he goes, JR, it's about to get a lot tighter around here when it comes to all this stuff.
He didn't ask for your phone when you sat down. Say, JR, give me the phone.
Yeah.
Give me the phone.
And I just looked at him and went, tighter, Doug. I've covered you for 16 years. It can't get any tighter.
He said that on Zoom. He goes, I guess I'm going to have to talk to you guys a little less. I'm like, oh boy, this is going to be rough.
Yeah. And so, that situation with Parayko, where did it leak? Who knows? But it was unfortunate. And we all know Colton Parayko. We all know how quiet and mild-mannered he is. And so I requested to talk to him out in Anaheim, and, public relations pulled him out of the locker room, and he walked down the hallway and he looked at me and he said, elephant in the room here. And I said, yeah. And so, there were some nerves. He wanted to make sure he didn't, say the wrong thing. Yep. And, definitely didn't want to disparage Buffalo. Made a point, Donnie, your adopted football city, of saying it's not about Buffalo. I talked to Jarmo Kekalainen. I talked to people who played there. So he did his homework. At the end of the day, he decided that, in a 12-hour span to make a decision, he wanted to stay put.
One of the things that we talked about that situation last week is that we did not think that it was a matter of him not wanting to go to Buffalo as much as it was a matter of him just not wanting to leave St. Louis, and kind of felt as though that narrative about him not wanting to go to Buffalo because everybody doesn't want to go to Buffalo was wrong. Yeah. It was completely untrue.
I think if Parayko was gifted a month to make that decision, maybe his decision was differently. I think the fact that you had to make a decision in less than 12 hours where everyone was paying attention to you. I mean, the best quote in your piece with Colton Parayko was him saying, I can't make a decision on coffee at Starbucks. So imagine being pressured where the entire hockey world is wondering, are you going to go? Are you going to go? Are you going to go? I don't think it had anything to do with Buffalo. I think it had everything to do with, I just don't want to leave St. Louis.
Yeah. And one thing here is, because you just said this, and I've said it too, if he had more time, the decision could have been different. He could have decided to go to Buffalo. I just want to be clear, again, because I've said that too. It doesn't mean that if he had more time, he wanted to leave St. Louis. It means that I think he and others, like a Shen, like a Falk, realize which direction the Blues are going, and that at some point, these older guys with term left on their contract that the Blues could get a hefty ransom for are going to see that, hey, the Blues are going in a different direction, and it doesn't make much sense for me to stick around for this. So I think that's the reason why he might eventually say yes to leaving St. Louis. It won't be because of, he wants to leave St. Louis.
Right. One of the things that, I'm incredibly curious about is when it comes to Colton Parayko and Robert Thomas specifically, do you believe, and I know that we don't very much, we don't know this, we're not in their house, we're not having conversations with them directly, but do you think that this leaves a bad and awkward kind of taste going into the offseason? Do you think that maybe, those guys went from, hey, I want to be here, to, well, I guess if they don't want me here, then maybe I need to explore potentially leaving here? Do you think that is there ill will?
I actually thought the Braden Shen quote to you was a pretty exposing one, to where he basically said, look, when you're asked twice by a team to waive your no trade, you kind of figure you're not into the same plans as that team's future. So you have to wonder, about that, especially with Parayko, because he was approached to move it. Like Robert Thomas, from what he has told us, he was never approached to waive his no trade clause. It's just rumors out there. But you have to think that, like he said, where there's smoke, there's fire. As much as and I've sat on this a little bit longer since we recorded that episode, as much as I think it would in the back of your mind haunt you a little bit, I also wonder if there's that realization to where it's like, maybe the team doesn't want me, but the city wants me. Mm-hmm. And like, if you're Colton Parayko, I mentioned this last week, like you're a legacy player right now. Like you could be the most tenured Blues player in franchise history by the time your contract is up. And even if the team is going in a different direction, I know I want to win, but maybe this team starts to win and I can be a part of it. But more than anything, like my legacy as an NHLer is remembered. And if you're a younger Robert Thomas, how long is this going to be? Because I want to establish my legacy, whether it's in St. Louis or somewhere else. Like I have to imagine there's part of those guys that would sit down and when you have that time to think about it, it's like, hey, you know what? The team may have looked to move me, but the city and the fans don't want me gone, and maybe I can be a part of this solution. Like in all reality, it comes down to those guys in terms of, do they want to be a part of the direction that the Blues are headed?
Yeah, it's a real good point. I don't know if I'm looking at this the right way, but, just in talking to players who have had that happen to them, and they find out, okay, I'm not wanted here. Braden Shen made the comment, hey, 2 years in a row they asked me. I feel like they look at the Blue Note as the holy grail, and this is the team I play for, and we're going to win a Stanley Cup, and I'm going to be here until that happens. And then all of a sudden this happens, and it's like now you got a stain on that shirt of yours, on that Blue Note.
You
it's
and these
like,
analogies.
You look at it, it's nacho cheese, right? It's a stain. Yeah. So you got the stain on your Blue Note. So you still look at it like the Blue Note. Like, this is my livelihood here, but there's just a blemish. Like, okay. And the other thing is now it's hanging over their heads. Like, Robert Thomas is playing the last 19 games knowing that in June they're going to say, hey,
will you move?
Will you move here? Colton Parayko, same thing. So, but I think the one thing that we all have to remember, I think we feel for the players in these situations a lot, and we should. Like, that's the human side of this. But we also have to understand that teams have to be able to do business. Mm-hmm. And at some point, Doug Armstrong, he always, he has to take the emotion out. Sometimes if we're going to be critical on the podcast every Wednesday of this roster, we have to understand that they have a job to do. And if that means moving out Braden Shen, and some people don't like it, and some people see the ovation he got the other night and, miss him or so on. Colton Parayko, Robert Thomas are going to get approached this summer. Hey, listen, Doug Armstrong has to do his job. And at some point, we'll see the fruits of what they're doing and just have to understand that it came down to business.
And I love that, because there have been plenty of examples to where teams do make hard, calculated decisions that fans don't like, but it actually benefits them. Like the Blues are a perfect example. Nobody liked the idea of moving on from David Backes at the time, but it looked like it turned out both sides. Backes went on to have a pretty decent career with Boston still, and he just never really was what he was in St. Louis again, while the Blues won a Stanley Cup because they were able to move off of that. They were able to bring in Braden Shen and bring in Ryan O'Reilly. So, there are teams that have to make those cold, calculated decisions, and JR is absolutely right. If we're going to come on the podcast and bash the team for 4 straight years and say, the roster's not good enough, you got to get it done, well, then you can't also out of the same mouth say, well, I don't want to move on from this guy and I don't want to move on from this guy. That guy was a part of that team. Now, maybe he wasn't the big reason why. We don't know who is that problem. Only the front office would know that. But you can't sit here and say, well, give me different players, but then pick the player that you want to move on from and him not be the guy that was the problem.
Let me go ahead and disagree with you there.
Uh-oh.
Because I think
the first time.
I think that you two can very much go with that very professional business sort of line of thinking that this is a business and but I get so goddamn attached to these guys. If I was the general manager, Bob Basson would probably still be on the roster. You know what I'm saying? It's just, guys, from a fan perspective right now, it's just very hard to get a good handle on exactly where in the heck we are and where in the heck we're going. And I read your article. I've gone so much back and forth about Robert Thomas. I get tired of, hearing about some of the things about conditioning, and maybe his line changes are very bad. And, sometimes his body language is awful. But then I also think about that team and those young players without him centering that number one line. And then it starts to get kind of scary as well. So if I could choose, I would like to be using both of these. I would like to be using the emotions and then getting mad at everything you guys say.
Okay,
That's
first of all, Donnie, you said, I don't know where we're at. That's why we're bringing Tom Stillman today.
Yeah, amen to that.
You can tell us. So,
we'll hopefully have answers.
So stick around. We got Tom Stillman coming. And second of all, I can't not tell you this is, I grew up a Blues fan in 80s, 90s, and you never think you're going to cover the team, but one day the job falls in your lap. But I think the Blues are in Dallas, and Bob Basson works for the Stars organization. So I went and interviewed him, and I never fanboy out, but I'm sitting there thinking, this is Bob Basson, like pound for pound, one of the best Blues players, hardest checkers. So
I could see JR too would be like, you're Bob Basson. And be like, yeah, I know I'm Bob Basson.
Yeah. Dude, let me tell you somebody who loved Bob Basson. Jeff Burton.
Jeff.
I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Yeah.
But dude, Bob Basson was Burton's dude. Yeah. He loved that guy.
Yeah.
Next time I see him, I'm going to say, Donnie still wants you on the team.
Yeah, Donnie wants you back to be a player if you don't mind.
Well, let's do this. Let's take a break. Let's come back. Second segment of the Last Minute Blues podcast. We got to hurry it up because Mr. Stillman's going to be here, and you don't keep the owner waiting. All right. Second segment, Last Minute Blues podcast coming your way next. All right, and then second segment here, Last Minute Blues podcast. So this is actually kind of perfect for the Blues. All of this talk for the last few weeks is about selling and selling and selling, and we're retooling and we're rebuilding. And then they win 4 in a row and then almost make it 5, then lose to the Islanders in overtime. Guys, I would just like for this team to at some point do something that makes sense to me. You know what I mean? Like, it's just you expect them to kind of, we all expected, I did, for them to kind of hit the skids and be going for this top pick. And if they continue to play the way in which that they have the last 2 weeks, there's no way they're going to get in the top 10. There's no way. I mean, there are a couple of those games they played absolutely fantastic. So again, they just continue to do things that befuddle me and do not make a whole heck of a lot of sense.
It's weird to be at because, of course, I do pre and post for the Blues. I cover the team, but I'm also a fan of the team. And you have to battle those internal feelings of well, it's good that they're winning because I'd like to see playoff hockey. That was awesome what we got to experience last year. But on the flip side, as a fan, I don't know if that's the healthiest for this team because once again, you go on a hot streak in the final month and a half of the season, you get close, you don't get a good draft pick, you don't get anything out of making the playoffs, and you're stuck in the middle. And that's the part that it's like, man, what are you doing? I feel like I've just come to this aha moment after they've gone on this run out of the break to where it's like, there's nothing I can do. I got to enjoy this ride because your roster is not bad enough to be a third worst team in the National Hockey League.
Not even
Vancouver,
close.
Calgary, the Rangers, Chicago, those teams' rosters are just bad. The Blues got talent, and that's where we're at. It's like, well, let's see what happens here. I like, on one part of it, you want to have that good pick, but I also know how the lottery works. The balls could drop in your favor. They couldn't. You could move back 3 spots in the draft, barring what type of happens in that lottery. So trying to be in a spot is wishful thinking. I think it would be healthier to get yourself a really good pick, but I also feel like this is a decent draft that if you're 5th or 6th or 7th, you're still going to get a really good player. It's just not that top 2 pick. And if you make something out of it and you find a way to build some confidence and get closer to the playoffs, that's also healthy for your team's long-term future as well.
First of all, I'll tell you how it's happening. Dylan Holloway is healthy. Robert Thomas is healthy.
Jimmy Snuggerud's a
Jimmy
stud.
Snuggerud looks like he's going to be an all-star in a couple years. That's how it's happening. It really is. And Joel Hofer's
I was going to say Hofer as well.
Joel Hofer's playing outstanding. But what strikes me, guys, is that it's a different lineup every night. You make the trade for Falk. Here comes Justin Hull. He hasn't played all season. He
nearly scores a goal in that first game.
Yeah, and so now you got Jonathan Drouin. He plays a couple games since he comes over in the trade, and then now he's going to sit out tonight, so he can go home and grab some underwear and come back. And it's just like whoever they put in the lineup seems to be adopting this structure. I think Joel Quenneville said after the Anaheim game, Blues played him and beat him 4-0. That just a great structure. So listen, when teams, you guys know this, down the stretch, backs against the wall, guys are playing for jobs. This tends to happen. I think they've run out of real estate in terms of being able to make up this ground and get in the playoffs. But I will say that the other day when I was on BK and Ferrario, Alex started painting the picture of, post Four Nations, post Olympic break. Here we go again. I'm like, what's he smoking? And then 3 games later, I'm like, oh my God.
Literally the way they came out, they won 3 in a row for the first time. They won 4 of 5. Thomas was on fire. Holloway was on fire. Goaltending was elite. And I'm like, this is the exact same thing happening all over again.
But regardless of what happens, it doesn't matter if you don't make the playoffs and you lose 8 down the stretch. The players that you need to be doing this are doing it. And that's what matters for the future. Look, Bergeron might not be here, Hall might not be. These guys, some of these guys might not be here. But if you got Holloway and if Thomas is here, Snuggerud, Hofer, Lindstein, like these guys are the guys that matter.
That's a pretty big if, though, with Thomas. And that's why it's like we talked about earlier, Donnie, of them being at 2 paths. If you keep Thomas, you lean into it and you say, all right, well, there's the piece. He's gotten the best of these guys. He's healthy now. If you don't keep Thomas, well, then you're setting it back a little bit. But the part that's so frustrating is you've done this now 2 straight years. Right. And let's say they go on a tear. What makes you believe that they'll do this in October? Yeah. Because that's 3 straight years where you've done this. And in October or November, you fall flat and you're like, I'm done with this. And that's why I think, Doug, it's the cold, calculated decision, right? Of, look, I get it. Everybody loves this, but we can't keep doing this. Right. As an organization, I can't keep believing that you're going to be great at the end of the season and not be good in the first chunk of the season.
I just don't understand why it takes until March before we rev this thing up. That, to me, is one of the most befuddling things. And I know there's been injuries and things, but some of these guys look like almost different players.
I think it's the rest. Yeah,
that's what I'm. Which is concerning.
That makes a ton of sense, too.
But doesn't that bring up the question of preparation for the beginning of the season? I
suppose.
Because the ultimate rest is being out from April until October and you're ready to go. But it's like October, the mentality doesn't look like what the mentality looks like. It really feels like this team has to just be in desperation mode before they actually turn it on.
Yeah, rest, desperation mode. Yeah.
Which is also concerning. Like, where is that desperation in October?
Exactly.
I want to ask a question here real quick about Dylan Holloway. Let's say that he continues this tear for the remainder of the regular season. What do you got? And we've talked about it before on the podcast about a potential bridge deal for him. Do you still think that that's going to be the way the Blues try to go with Dylan Holloway? Or how, if he just continues this tear, do you think that kind of plays in to what sort of deal he might be getting from the Blues?
Yeah. So if he were healthy all year and put up the year that we thought, you could still kind of see the 8x8 probably. I think the injuries do bring some, pause, hesitation to, hey, what do we do here? But the way he's come back and the way when he's out there and healthy, looks like himself and is an unbelievable player. Like, if I'm the Blues, I don't think I would be hesitant to give him, an 8. It's going to be a 7-year now.
Yeah, because you can't do the 8.
On the next CBA. Would you give him $8 million? I probably would. Like, some of these injuries have been fluky, even though he's had a couple of them. I guess the thing is going to be if they don't want to pay him like that, and it is a deal where he's got to prove it a little bit longer, prove that he's got to stay healthy, then I'm sure he would probably want the bridge deal because he's not going to sign, 7 times 6, so he would want the shorter term deal and make the money on the next contract.
Yeah, so they control his rights basically for 4 more seasons after this one. He's not a UFA until 4 seasons from now. Like, I wonder if... I don't know if you go long-term if you're the Blues because you're like, hey, man, I just want to see if you could stay healthy. Because if you could stay healthy, we're willing to pay you the money that you're deserved. But I also don't see Holloway signing anything more than a 2-year deal, right? Like, you'd want some security in the sense of, well, let's say I do get injured again. Like, I need some security. Like, I wonder if that sweet spot is going to be like 3 years to where you have control for the next 3. And you're already going to be the Blues control no matter what. You give them a slight pay raise, but that 4th year, the one that you'll be walking up the free agency with, that's where we'll find out what you're made of. But, I mean, if I'm the Blues, like, I'm with you, JR. Both injuries that he's dealt with has been because he's just working his ass off on the ice. It's not like he's not working and he's, breaking his ankle or something like that. Like, you had the puck or you got hit and your bone or your muscle just tears right off your hip bone. You twist your ankle.
He got tangled up with Buchnevich.
In practice.
High ankle sprain.
It's not like this guy's just an injury-riddled player that every time he steps on the ice, he gets hurt. So if he's willing to, I'd look at it and be like, hey, let's see if we could get you at a steal for 7 years. And, this may look like an incredible deal if you're a 100-point player for us.
All right, one more thing, and then we're gonna jump and we're gonna wait for Mr. Stillman. The play of Logan Mailloux. I would like to hear what both of you guys have said. He's been logging more minutes. He definitely looks like he's more of a player out there and more involved in things. Can you talk about what you've seen out of that young man over the course of the last few weeks?
Yeah, and I know we had some questions about him early in the season. Whoa, and then, Bolduc scoring the goals. But I really do feel like we did say, let's roll the tape back, that, give him some time, let him play some games. And now with Falk gone, even before Falk left, he's got some opportunity in the top 4, logging 20 minutes, looks more confident, looks good. I still think it's going to be 2 years before we see, his true potential. Mm-hmm. But I think the improvement, Donnie, that he's made from the start of the season to now is tremendous. And I think you can see now what the Blues were hoping for and seeing. And I think that with the Blues, good young defensemen coming up with Adam Juracek and Logan Mailloux, and now you got Philip Broberg long term, they really do have some pieces to coming together on defense.
What I think too is Logan Mailloux, use Philip Broberg as an example. When the Blues got him off the offer sheet, we really didn't know. We were going off of what he did in the Stanley Cup playoff that year, and we're like, this guy could be good. But he was still an unknown, and last season was like, oh, okay, this guy's a star. That was 3 years into him being a professional, to where he was at the NHL and the minors, at the NHL and the minors. I believe this would just be the second full season for Logan Mailloux in terms of being a pro. So if you're going down the same track record, it took Broberg 3 seasons before he even really got the feel of it. And last year was his first full NHL season. So if you get a full year of Logan Mailloux now, and then let's say next year you're going to have hiccups, but you're still developing, you're going to look at this and be like, yeah, but this guy's got top 4 potential. I'm looking at it as now to where his defensive play is night and day compared to what it was. And I think a lot of that was just confidence for him for how the season started, but you're also allowing him to play his game. You're letting him play offense. You're letting him generate opportunities, and then you play a little bit more confident on the back end. So I think if you just go off the Broberg track record, you were probably looking at a couple of years before you figure out what Mailloux is. But if you go down that same path, you may find out that Logan Mailloux's a potential top pair defenseman next season.
Wow. All right. Well, let's do this. Let's wrap it up. Fantastic. I was just going to say our episode was fantastic. That's a little narcissistic. But we got Tom Stillman, chairman of the Blues, coming in next. So there will be a part 2 to our podcast today. And the Last Minute Blues podcast is presented by Blue Note Roofing, roofing, siding, and gutters. Your St. Louis roofing experts. Visit BlueNoteRoofingSTL.com for a free inspection. Part 2 with Blues chairman Tom Stillman coming next. It is a special edition of the Last Minute Blues podcast, joined in the Jeff Burton studio by the usuals. Can I say that? Alex Ferrario from 101 ESPN, Jeremy Rutherford from The Athletic, and we have a very special guest joining us for the Last Minute Blues podcast, Blues chairman Tom Stillman. Tom, it's wonderful to have you here. Thank you very much for taking the time to talk to us today.
Well, thanks very much for having me.
So the first place that I want to go here and just kind of sort of get right into it is everybody that's sort of sitting in this circle right now doing the podcast, JR, Alex, myself. At the beginning of this Blues season, we really thought that this was a team that could make the playoffs. And we definitely thought that this was a team that had a very bright future, kind of as they were from the jump. Did you start this season too with that same sort of mindset that we had, that this was a playoff team or close to it?
Yeah, I did come in thinking we would challenge for a playoff spot, have a decent chance of getting one. But I have to say at the same time, I did think as the season was approaching that expectations in the market had maybe gotten over their skis a bit. Mm-hmm. I thought because at that point there, as I recall it, people weren't talking about being on the bubble and maybe we get in, and it was we were going to be we could be top. I thought it was getting a little overblown where we were, but I did think we had a decent shot at the playoffs after what we had done at the end of last year.
So as the season starts, and at what point, when things start to maybe go a little sideways, do the conversations with Doug and Alex start to maybe perk up about, hey, we have to make some changes here because this is not, outside of that run after the Four Nations, we kind of are looking at that as maybe an anomaly, maybe not what this team is all about. So when did those conversations start to happen? Maybe not necessarily when, but was it pretty soon after the start of the season that you started having those discussions?
I'm not sure, but I don't think it was pretty soon.
Okay.
Because, you got to let a team get going and recover from a bad start and see how things go, and let the coaches try different approaches, try different lines and combinations, maybe adjust some systems a bit. And all those things were done. So there was a lot of talk during that time about making those adjustments and questioning why, this was happening, why this player was off and that player was off. But you can't really start, a month in saying, well, let's throw the bums out. Let's start. You gotta, give them a chance to play. Give them, make all the efforts you can to make changes. And give the coaches and the managers a chance to do what they can do. And and then at some point you start wondering, well, maybe this isn't working this way.
Tom, how, every week we come in here and they should do this, they could do this, why don't they do this? And just, I can't imagine what it's like to be behind the scenes with you, Doug and Alex, trying to come to conclusions and make those hard, calculated decisions. What's that been like this year? Because we're going to talk about it in a minute. This retool, from a prospect perspective is going really well. These young players look really good, and I can't wait till we talk about that. But the hard decisions that you've had to make leading up to the trade deadline.
It's a funny thing that when we are playing like that, and then it keeps going. First, there are discussions about, like I was saying, how can we change this? Can we change that? And then it also becomes, what's going on with X? What's the deal with? What's doing this? There's a lot of that. Just a lot of time and energy goes into seeing how the coaches and the managers can get the athlete to play at his best, which is not only great for the team but great for his career. And it's not. I can imagine 40 years ago, it wasn't like that so much. You said, what the hell? I want to send him down. Tell him to do it. Or, you're figuring people out, trying to figure people out. What's making this guy tick? What's doing, there's a lot of that in addition to, X's and O's and overall culture and all sort of that. But when you say then the decisions, you do get this sense of, it's coming. We're going to have to make some decisions, and that's a season like this. That's what it imposes on an organization. There's some decisions coming up.
Well, and Tom, I'm glad you said that, because I think the biggest question I've seen doing post games leading up to the trade deadline, and then once the trade deadline passed, was people saying, what's the direction? Where are they going? Because I remember after the trade deadline where they moved on from Ryan O'Reilly and all those players, Doug had talked about, we're kind of trying to mimic what the LA Kings have done, right? That 3-year retool to put yourself back into that contending window. And you mentioned how maybe some people, because of that push, got a little bit over their skis in terms of how well that the Blues played. Do you still view this in terms of the vision that you, Doug, and Steen have talked about of this is where we're headed, that timeline is still right on pace with what you guys imagined when you originally talked about it?
I think it is. And one thing I would do is maybe discount the effect that late last season had on people and thinking, oh, we're done.
Yeah.
We weren't done, So I think we're on a very similar, schedule to what we were on before that. Before, it was a great. I mean, I don't take that away from anybody. It was a short period. People played fantastic hockey. Robert Thomas, perhaps the best offensive player in the league, but and that in a lot of people's minds accelerated the timeline a lot. And I don't think it did, but I don't think we're behind on the overall from when we started that and whatever that was, 23, when we made all the trades, O'Reilly. Those are tough trades too.
Yeah.
All those, I think we're on a pretty similar timeline.
But I have to imagine too, Tom, that when you transitioned away from the O'Reilly Tarasenko leadership into the Braden Shen leadership, Justin Falk leadership, in the back of your minds, you kind of knew that at some point it's going to have to transition to this younger core that we have invested a lot of time into in terms of draft picks and younger players, the development side. In the back of your mind, you had to know that retool was going to push these guys into a position to take over, and it just got to this point right after a playoff push last season. But at
that time, at the end of last season, it looked like, well, maybe this is working out.
Yeah.
So I tried to describe this the other day in talking to JR and Matt. We said back then, whenever, 2023,
yeah.
We're going to go on 2 tracks. And we tried to be very clear, this is what we're doing. On one track, it's a whatever, call it retool. And we're going to pull together assets, young players and draft choices, and we're going to rebuild a younger team, and develop it into a contending team. Track number 2 is, but we're going to try to stay competitive as we do that. We're not going to go down to the studs and do that 8 to 10 year rebuild that we've seen around the league. It is that long, and it doesn't always work out. Buffalo's just now coming out of it.
Yeah.
And so we go forward on those 2 tracks. And so last season, when it started out, and we're playing pretty, the retool, that's great.
Yeah.
But we're not saying competitive. We're happy. Boy, we got great prospects. We got these guys. They're not here yet, but that's going. But the competitive part wasn't. Mm-hmm. But then at the end of the season, after the 4 nations, both parts were working. Mm-hmm. The retool is still continuing. We got the assets we're bringing, but suddenly we're competitive, and that's with Shen, that's with Falk, that's with Parayko, everybody. So that combination that looks pretty good. Come back this year, so we re-up with that. This year, in my mind, the number 1 track, the retool, has, if anything, accelerated. Because, now Dvorsky's saying, and we brought him up this year, he was going to be up for a couple games, and you can't send it back. Broberg has turned into, he's going to be a number 1 defenseman. Holloway's really come along, but, all that stuff did, I think, accelerate the track 1 retool part. But you look on the ice, and the stay competitive part, not so much. That wasn't happening. And so, you go through the fall and the season up to now, and like I was saying, what do we change? What do we do? What's going on here? What are we doing? But at some point, you got to conclude, well, that staying competitive part isn't really working with the way we are. Number 1, and number 2, if you acknowledge that's not great, and then you think, these are players that I really like those 2 guys. I have tremendous respect for them. Shen and Falk, they're tremendous players. Parayko, you just couldn't have, better, stalwarts on your team. But at some point, you got to say, if that's not working, are we better off, kind of changing the stay competitive part and putting those assets into the retool track and getting future assets for these guys, since we're not that competitive.
Yeah.
And so, that's the conclusion we arrived at.
I feel like, as you know, I'm 50 years old. I've been a diehard Blues fan since I was like 8 or 9 years old. I feel as though that this young group of players is as exciting of a group as I can ever remember in my time as a Blues fan. There are so many of these guys, Snuggerud and Dvorsky and Broberg. And I mean, so the idea of it being tore down to the studs never, ever made any sense to me, because we're just too good for that. But it's also, we're kind of in this sort of weird middle as we kind of wait for these guys to mature. So at the same time, some of the losses do kind of bum me out, maybe even piss me off from time to time.
No.
But when you see some of this youth, to me, it just almost seems like sky's the limit, and we just have to be a little patient, which is something that I'm never good at. And also, too, when you talk about, Mr. Stillman, when you talk about people being over their skis with this Blues season, I feel like he's talking about me, because I was after the Four Nations last year and the run and then the 7-game series against Winnipeg, I came in hot. I think I even said to Steve Ott, why not us? So I'm one of those folks.
I want to make clear is when I say, people got over their skis a bit, I am not being in the least bit critical.
For sure.
From where I sit, that's what you want. You want people to be excited.
That's the competitiveness.
Well, the competitiveness and the hope springs eternal of sports.
Yeah.
We got a new year. We got a new start. We got, and certainly we all came in. We weren't, moaning and groaning. We were excited.
Yeah.
We were going to have a new season. So there was nothing negative intended there. It's good to have everybody excited coming into a season.
It wasn't getting over your skis as much as it was, hey, this was probably something we didn't anticipate. It happened, and now you hope that expedites this retool that we were talking about. Because the one thing I know that Curbs and Joey, we were talking about so much on that push was, it's not so much of what they're doing now, it's what they're doing for a guy like Snuggerud. It's what they're doing for a guy like Holloway and Broberg, because these are the key pieces that are going to be carrying it forward. It was just, I think, at the beginning of the season, there was an assumption that it was like, oh, they'll be gangbusters right out of the gate. You're expecting what they did in the playoffs to carry over. And I don't know how many former players and Hall of Famers we talked to at the beginning of the season, Chris Pronger being one of them. It's like, guys, you can't carry over what you do in one season to the other. There's momentum that has to be built up, and you're going to have to find that in a different form at the beginning of the season.
And Doug has said as much over the last week.
Yeah.
That, maybe at training camp, we all assumed too much. We're just going to pick up where we left off without doing the spade work, pre-training camp, training camp to make sure that was the case. I don't know.
But Tom, it's one thing to be on the drawing board and say, okay, we're going to go into this retool and okay, we're going to trade O'Reilly, Tarasenko. There's 3 first-round picks. And then you go to draft night that night and you hear the names Dvorsky and Stenberg and Lindstein, but they're just names, right? The other night, Tom, as you know, the 3 played together in the same game. I mean, just to see, not just hear the names a couple years ago, but to see the players on the ice performing well together, just how much confidence does that give you in that this retool is going well?
That was quite a night. Dvorsky's been great all season. Stenberg was really impressive when he came up. But now when you add that third in there, and Lindstein, he just fit in seamlessly. I mean, he fit in well. He's a really beautiful skater, fantastic skater. So, yeah, it does make you feel like, okay, this is, we're making progress. Our scouts, our scouting team, our management has made good choices. Our development people are developing them. At the same time, everybody had a good game.
Yeah,
they're not going to have a good game every time.
Right. Yeah.
That we've all seen. The big thing about young players, great as they are, they go up and down for a while.
Yeah.
Consistency is really difficult. It's the first time they played, this kind of schedule against great big guys. And, it's the best league in the world. And you can have a good game doing that consistently is that's a process.
I think that's the funny part about the league, because everybody assumes that a top 10 or a top 15 pick, a first-round pick, is going to turn into Macklin Celebrini every single time, right? Or Matthew Schaefer. And then what you do is you draft a player that's 15th overall, and you see a guy who's first overall, and it's like, oh, well, that guy's doing it, so why can't my guy do it? And it's like, oh, well, he must be a bust. And it's like, hold on a minute. There's a reason this one was picked there, this one was picked there. And there's development for all of these guys that set in. But that's what happens in a league where you get young guys that step in and immediately have an impact. Like Snuggerud's a perfect example. I think people tempered their expectations, and rightfully so, when he stepped in last season with the Blues. That first game, I remember being like, oh, okay, this kid's better than what we originally thought, because came in and immediately contributed to that first line.
He did, but remember, so he was drafted at 18, and he played after that 2 or 3 more years.
Three, yeah.
Minnesota. Mm-hmm. So, he was playing, and not that level is anything like the NHL, but it's old guys. It's not 18-year-olds. Most of those guys are spending a couple years in junior before they even start. So he had been playing that. All that said, I was amazed.
Yeah.
Because we had just had the Frozen Four.
Yeah.
And I, saw the hockey, and that's great. Really good hockey and everything, but that's really different from what it is here. And I'm thinking that's going to be a tough transition. And there, he just fit in right away.
Is it getting over your skis to say that Jimmy Snuggerud has the best shot since Brett?
Wow.
Well, I don't know. It's different from his. But,
yeah, definitely different. Yeah. David Perron had a nice shot. There've been others.
Tarasenko, obviously a nice shot.
Yeah,
but it's just such a rip.
Yeah.
Even a Scott Young or something. I mean,
guys
had.
I want to ask you about one of the other young players. Tom, do you envision in the future, and I know that there's a lot between here and there, but do you envision in the future Jake Neighbors wearing the C for this team? Because I absolutely love every single minute that young man is on the ice, and I am so proud that he is a Blue Note.
Well, I'm not going to
weigh in
on that specific question, but I will say that I think the organization definitely sees him as a leader now and a leader in the future. So he is definitely seen that way, mature beyond his years, kind of old school in his approach to everything, respect for the game, the way he plays it, all that. So, yeah, I think the organization sees him as a leader going forward.
And Donnie, Tom knows how excited you get about the Blues, because I talked to him yesterday, and he is a listener of the Last Minute Blues podcast. In fact, I'll let Tom pick it up from here. But Tom, tell the story about being in the duck blind, I believe, listening to the Last Minute Blues.
Yeah, I was in the duck blind a few times last year, and pretty quiet, and not a lot going on. And I don't know if you know what a duck blind is. Like it's like a steel box in the water in the marsh. And hunting by myself and not much flying, so I went to a podcast. Last Minute Pod, I'll try that. So I'll have it down on the shelf, playing on the speaker, and Donnie's going, well, how about this and how? But I think this guy's the best. This is the greatest.
Tom looked out the window. It's like, duck!
He's going, and you're scaring the ducks. They're never going to come in.
Here's our new promo.
I don't think anything has ever felt so accurate in my entire career. The thing is, Tom, where they get me is that these guys are the experts, and they bring me in as the fan, and all I know how to do is be the fan, and sometimes as a fan, I'm a little off.
Great, Donnie. Tom's never going to listen to the podcast again because you ruined duck hunting.
I'm scaring the ducks, apparently.
It actually enhanced the hunt.
It made it more entertaining than with this one.
That's the thing about being a Blues fan. I don't know how to mid-level this. You know what I mean? Like all I can do is seemingly overreact or underreact. There's sort of nowhere in the middle.
But I got to imagine, Tom, because we talk about this all the time about the type of owner, chairman you are, to where you're always out there at the beginning of the season, shaking hands with season ticket holders. You're doing the meet and greets out in public. You probably get stopped more times than not. You see that elite fan base and that reaction like Donnie is, to where it's like immediate. It's like, Tom, what the heck? What's going on here? Right?
But you know, what's interesting about that is that it's not even 1% of people that would ever say, what the hell's going on?
Right.
It's, and we talked about this yesterday. It's, a much broader view. I mean, even after, I'm walking out after a loss, it's okay, but we got this, not so great tonight, but we're getting there, and to have fans come up and say things like that. And I was saying, I bet that doesn't happen in Philadelphia.
Oh, no. No way.
That says a lot about, the values of, our Midwestern city and the quality of Blues fans and their loyalty. And so many of them being kind of tuned in to where we are. They're not just going to game without any context.
Yeah.
They've listened, they've read about, what we're trying to do. We've tried to be clear and transparent about where we're going, and they know that, and they build that in. So
yeah, I want to ask you one more. I'm sorry,
no, go ahead,
I wanted to ask you one thing about the GM transition. What have you seen out of Alex Steen over the course of the last couple of years? How have you seen him grow into this position that he's going to be taking over in a short period of time?
It's been really interesting and fun to watch because, going from you're a player and you're, here's your schedule, do that, but he's very much a thinking person. He's very intelligent. He's, he assesses everything he hears. He doesn't just, that's the case. He, he wants to learn about something before he just gives you something off the cuff. I mean, if it's an area, if there is, the number one sweet spot for Alex, it's the culture of a team and playing for the team and getting people focused on the team and how that, all that, he didn't have to research that. Mm-hmm. But if it's something that's different, and he'll sometimes say, and Doug tells me, let me think about that or look into that before I really express a view on it. And then he'll do some research and he'll call people and, former players, former coaches. He wants to learn, and he is learning. So, you've got a guy who is dedicated to really learning the craft. He's not there to be, he's a beloved player here, so we can kind of shoot the breeze and he can do this and, things will probably work out. That's not his deal. He's a serious dude about, knowing what he's doing and doing it right.
And the one thing that I believe you've made pretty clear in the past when we've talked about this, Tom, is I think people view this as, Alexander Steen's taking over, and in the back of their minds they're thinking, oh, so he's going to be the one that's just doing everything from now on. You've made it pretty clear that Doug Armstrong is still here, and he is still going to be a massive voice with Alexander Steen and that circle when it comes to the decisions being made by the St. Louis Blues.
He will be, and it's an important part of the whole process that, when you're putting in an inexperienced GM, you still have what I consider the best GM in the biz, teaching, mentoring, advising. Now, and that at the same time, Doug is very conscious of process and who gets the voice. And, his view is going to be, well, he and the others, they're going to advise Alex. But in the end, Alex is making the decisions, after July 1. I've seen him be very respectful of that, 'cause, I could say something like, well, why don't you And about the coach. Yeah, that's the coach. That's the coach. That's the coach. You know, we had that's the coach. That's a coaching decision. And you know, so I think there are probably in some quarters people thinking, oh, right. You know, what? Doug's not exactly a shrinking violet. What is he going to do? You know, but he does have respect for the process and who gets that call. But you know, I think early on, Doug will be much more vocal and all over things.
Yeah.
And you know, that as time goes on, less of that is necessary.
Doug, real quick, Doug told the story when we did Obie Clark's a few years ago with me and Curbs, and we were talking, I think Curbs asked him just in terms of like a memorable spot early on in your career as general manager. And he told the story of, I think it was Joe Nieuwendyk, and I hope I'm not butchering the story, but there was a big trade at the deadline on his desk the year that he took over as the general manager. And Armstrong was like, you know, Bob Gainey was the one that was the president of hockey ops. And Doug asked Bob, like, hey, what do you think I should do? And Bob looked at Doug and said, I don't know what you're going to do, but I'm going to lunch, and then walked out of the room. And then Doug's like, I have to make this decision now. Really? But that's what I've always, since this succession plan has been in place, that's what I've always viewed it as. People ask all the time, like, oh, so Doug's going to be the one that's making the final decision. I'm like, well, from Doug's experience, he was the one that was forced to make that decision right away. He was there. He gave some opinions on it, but then walked out of the room, and Bob Gainey was the one that said, I'm going to lunch. So I think that painted the picture perfectly of what Doug and Steen's relationship is going to be moving forward.
And you know, I don't know Bob Gainey, but I've heard a lot about him from Doug. And that sounds to me like Gainey wasn't excited about that lunch. It wasn't. It was the whole point is, now it's you.
You're making this decision.
He's making the process point. Nope, I've given you my view. Now these are your decisions, and that's what we're doing. So,
hey, Tom, speaking of the coach, Jim Montgomery, when he was hired, 5-year contract, Doug said, we think he can help us win now and in the future. Obviously, this year hasn't gone, you know, how everybody liked, but just could you assess the job Jim's done? And I said this to you yesterday at lunch that, you know, you go to practice, and there's so much teaching, so much instruction, so much working with the younger guys. Have you witnessed that too, I'm sure? And just how do you see him with this young, growing team?
Well, I see him a little frustrated.
Yeah,
right now. Because I don't. Yeah. You know, he's never been in this situation. Mm-hmm. He's never missed playoffs or had a losing season or anything like that. But we made a decision to hire Jim Montgomery because we think he's one of the best coaches in the league. And we believe that as much today as we ever did. Been a tough season, but we've seen him doing everything possible to work it this way, work it that way. And, you know, we're very comfortable that he's the guy to do it. And I think this got, I mean, Doug made clear early on when we were struggling, the coach isn't
not
going
the problem
anywhere.
Yeah.
Okay, so you guys figure this out.
Yeah.
And that remains the same.
Tom, I had one more question that I wanted to ask, because I know over this past week there's just been a ton of noise. Obviously, you imagine it with the trade deadline, but Thomas and Kyrou's name is the one that I think fans bring up the most right now. And just reading the comments that I know you had with JR and Matt yesterday, it truly feels as if you guys look at Robert Thomas and Jordan Kyrou as those pieces that are in charge of this team moving forward.
You know, they are, you know, the veteran core now. They along with Boots and Parayko. So yeah, they have big roles to play, and you know, we need to have them fill those roles and become, you know, effective every night and team players. You know, about making sure that they're, you know, doing their jobs, but also making sure that the team is succeeding and that they're making other people better as well. I think that's that's what we saw in 2019.
Yeah.
We reached that nirvana that is very hard to reach, in my view, in pro sports, because everybody's a business unto themselves, and it's not easy to get everybody to be focusing on the entity, the team, and maybe subordinating their own interest to make the team better. And that's what we reached. And that's the culture that we need to get back to. And, you can bet that will be a focus of Alex Steen, and it's certainly a focus of Monty. And, and those, now smaller core of veterans, and for the most part, younger veterans, that's what we need.
Well, we're really, really, I can speak for myself, and that I'm incredibly excited about the future of this team.
You? Really?
Yeah, how about that?
Duck blind Donnie.
There goes another. Oh, man. They're still not coming.
Tom's going to be listening the next time. Be like, where is it?
I literally cannot wait to get out of here and call my parents. I can. My dad is going to cackle about this whole thing. Mr. Stillman, thank you very much for your time.
Tom, thank you.
Thank you very much for your time. We appreciate it. For JR from The Athletic, our boy Alex Ferrario from 101 ESPN, I'm Donnie Fandango, special edition of the Last Minute Blues podcast. Thank you very much for listening and watching.
The Last Minute Blues podcast on 101 ESPN
is presented by Blue Note Roofing. Roofing, siding, and gutters. Your St. Louis roofing experts. Visit BlueNoteRoofingSTL.com for free inspection.